Every now and then, a game will release that pretty much redefines a genre. A game that is so good and it's just universally loved, and missing out on it would feel like missing out on what is basically an incredible experience. Other times, a game comes out that reviews so well that buying it is an easy decision. You're almost guaranteed to have a good time. When those games come around, I honestly tend to fall into the hype. Sometimes that payoff is exactly what I expected. Other times, I end up dropping what are basically considered masterpieces for one reason or another. In this video, I'll be going over great games that I gave up on. Up first, we have Baldur's Gate 3, which is probably one of the strangest games on this list. It's strange because it offers just about everything that I would want from a video game: an expansive and sprawling story with tons of decisions to make, an open-ended combat system which allows for an insane degree of freedom we rarely see in any game, great production value, writing, and pretty much everything in between. I mean, there's a clear reason why this game won Game of the Year. And yeah, I mean, the game is very, very good. And that's coming from someone who rarely plays the turn-based CRPG genre. Like, I've dabbled in it before, playing a little bit of the Pillars of Eternity series and the Pathfinder games, but Baldur's Gate 3 was the first time I really sunk my teeth into it. My time with the game, however, was all over the place. In a game that offers what feels like limitless freedom and choice, I instead started getting something called choice paralysis. I'm sure some of you are familiar with that term, but basically there are so many choices to make that I ended up making none. I've started and restarted this game no less than 10 times, trying different classes, different builds, different races, making different choices, and truthfully, I've put in well over 40 hours into this game, which honestly, in the grand scheme, it's not very much, but the catch is that I never made it out of Act 1. I mean, I would basically exhaust all of Act 1 or get close to it time and time again, then drop the game because I felt like I was getting a little bit burnt out. And this cycle repeated so many times. I would get pretty far, I would stop playing, and then try to pick up from where I left off, then realize that I had absolutely no idea what was going on, and instead figured it would be better to just start over. I know how good this game is and just how fun the experience was every time I booted it up, so there's really nothing wrong with this game at all. It's more so a me problem. I do plan on sitting down and actually completing a playthrough of Baldur's Gate 3 sooner or later. Up next, we have The Witcher 3, another god tier game in the pantheon of gaming, but one that I could never actually sit down and play all the way through. It's sad because, like Baldur's Gate 3, I know how good this game is. Every time I start over, I come in ready to soak in the world, the lore, just do all the side missions and do everything there is to do. The lore, the writing, the world, it's all just top tier stuff. For some reason, however, I always get to a certain point in this game and just drop it. I'll make it all the way up to the mission where you need to be in a disguise for some party. It's very early on stuff, but I get to that point, I beat the mission, then drop the game, and it's like clockwork. It's very weird. I know there's a very hefty and memorable experience that this game offers, but it sort of falls back to what happens with Baldur's Gate 3. I put the game down for so long that I end up forgetting where I left off and all that took place, so a fresh start is the only thing that makes sense. Now, I've bought this game on pretty much every platform available. I've bought it on PC thinking that's where I'm going to beat the game. I bought it on my PS5 with the new next-gen upgrade thinking, yes, this is the time where I will actually complete it. I even bought this game on the Nintendo Switch, and honestly, I have no idea what I was thinking. That was an abysmal port. It was like 420p in the open world. Terrible choices. That being said, I do plan on playing The Witcher 3 all the way through early next year since they are coming out with that new expansion. I really want to soak in this world and take it all in. I know it's a beautiful game and it's a favorite game of many people, even some of my viewers. So I do plan on playing this game and I do plan on finally finishing it. Up next, we have Helldivers 2. Helldivers 2 was the kind of game that was everywhere when it released. I don't think anybody expected it to blow up the way it did. Probably not even the developers, truthfully. There were clips everywhere, people accidentally killing one another, pulling off some crazy moments, and so on. It was absolutely massive. My friend group even ended up jumping on the game as well, and it's not even the type of game that they would normally play. Me though, I continued to sit on the sidelines because I didn't see what the appeal was. I didn't know what I would be pushing towards. Really a personal issue, but when I play a game, I need something to push towards. I need an end goal, which I know is not all that healthy. That being said, I continued watching Helldivers 2 from afar and seeing seeing just all the fun that everyone is having. Basically, a year after the game's release, I finally bit the bullet and ended up buying the game. I figured there would be more than enough updates and patches that added content, more to do, and so on. So I booted the game up, ran through the initial tutorial, and made it to my first mission. That feeling that everyone seemed to get while playing this game of pure fun and mindless action honestly just didn't hit for me at all. I'm sure it's just a me problem, but nothing in particular about the game's progression systems was all that interesting. It never felt like I was working towards something personally, and I know the game really nails the feeling of being at war and every person plays a role, but that didn't really resonate with me for one reason or another. You're fighting for the greater good, you're part of this massive war effort, but at the end of a session, I didn't have a strong sense of what I personally had built towards. There were no gear upgrades that were meaningful, there was no real character arc, the leveling system was pretty basic. Nothing made me feel like I was growing as a player outside of getting new equipment every now and then. Now, I want to be completely clear here, this is not a knock on the game at all. Helldivers 2 found its audience and it found it fast for a very good reason. But what it really comes down to are the type of games that I gravitate towards. I like progression. I like having a narrative thread to everything. I like feeling like there's something waiting for me the next time I log on. Helldivers 2 just didn't really scratch that itch, and after a while, I ended up moving on. Up next, we have Stellar Blade, a game that is truthfully very solid, and I could understand why people enjoyed it as much as they did, and not for the obvious reasons. I picked this one up ready to log into the 30 to 40 hour experience, but ended up dropping it a little more than halfway through. I made it past that one desert region, and the whole time I was playing the game, it felt like it was good, but there was something missing, and I honestly could not pinpoint what that thing was. The combat was more than solid. The game looked great, the dialogue and writing were a little bit cheesy but tolerable, and the story was kind of interesting. Realistically, it should have been a game that I played all the way through, but for whatever reason, I just never felt that pull to keep going. And that is what makes Stellar Blade weird for me, because I don't have a massive complaint that I can point to and say, yeah, that's kind of exactly why I stopped playing. It was more like that the game was checking every box, but it wasn't fully clicking for me. The combat had that depth, the bosses were fun enough and actually kind of interesting. The world had some cool areas. The soundtrack was really well done, but after a while, I just felt like I was slogging through the game rather than actually being hooked by it. Even the exploration started to feel a little bit familiar. I'd enter a new zone, sort of scan around, collect materials, fight a few enemies, do side content, and then kind of do the same thing over and over again. Honestly, maybe I just played this game at the wrong time. Maybe I should just go back and give it another shot because I hear great things about it, and there's a sequel coming out sometime soon. So maybe I should go back and actually play Stellar Blade with an open mind. Up next, we have Metaphor ReFantazio. Every now and then, I'll buy a game that's completely out of my typical interests, and this was one of those games. When the reviews first dropped, they were all glowing. The game ended up scoring a 94 on Metacritic. Once I saw that, I had this strange urge to buy the game in hopes that I can finally break into this genre. I dabbled a little bit with Persona 5, but ultimately felt like it wasn't for me, despite how successful and well received that game is. So when Metaphor dropped, I was like, okay, let me finally give this another shot. It's a new storyline, a new world, new systems, different setting, since the whole school setting wasn't something I particularly enjoyed. But maybe this will allow me to find joy in these types of games and open up a whole new genre for me. Well, that unfortunately did not happen. I ended up playing the game for about 4 or 5 hours, mainly getting through the introduction and into the first main city, but it didn't last much longer. The endless dialogue just kept going. The turn-based combat system was something I never really enjoyed to begin with, and I'm not sure why I thought this time around it would be different. It's not a knock on the game at all. There's a reason why it reviewed well and why people who enjoy this series and type of game hold it in such high regard. I think turn-based combat isn't something I enjoy to begin with, and really the only game that has really changed that for me has been Expedition 33. However, I didn't finish that game, but that's another story. Metaphor was a complete misjudgment on my part. I ended up dropping that game after those 5 hours, and if you've played any of these games, you know the first 4, 5, 10 hours are really just a tutorial and an introduction to the base systems. Anyway, I ended up dropping this game, and it's likely one that I will never play again. Up next, we have Final Fantasy 16, and yeah, this is a tough one for me. The game does so many things right, and that's a very common thread that we've seen basically in all the games in this list. It has an epic storyline, the cutscenes are beautiful, the scale of the icon fights, it's just top tier stuff. But where the game really faltered for me was in the gameplay and in its RPG systems. And I know it's a weird thing to say, but this didn't really feel like a Final Fantasy game to me. The RPG systems were just very lackluster. Clive never felt like I was building him in a real way. There are some things to craft, but everything just sort of feels streamlined in a sense. The combat, while active and dynamic in the best ways possible, kind of got old and boring to me quite fast. I never really enjoyed the Devil May Cry games much, so when I saw that the combat was being translated into a similar system, I was already kind of apprehensive, but figured that the story would be able to hold me through. I also just didn't like the gear and inventory system, and this sort of all ties into the general lack of role-playing systems within this game. Yeah, I don't know, again, this could just be a me thing, because I know a lot of people absolutely love the direction of Final Fantasy 16, but for me, the further I got, the more I felt like I was mostly being carried by the presentation rather than the actual engaging gameplay. The world is beautiful, the performances are absolutely great, and the big story moments that exist hit really hard, but then I ended up getting dropped back into these very basic side quests, these tiny gear upgrades, and the combat encounters just started to feel more repetitive to me than getting any sort of satisfaction out of them. I wanted more party control, more meaningful builds, more reasons to experiment, and just more RPG texture in general. Instead, this game was a big letdown for me in that sense, and I ended up dropping this game about halfway through as well. Up next, we have Middle-earth Shadow of War, but it's on the list for a completely different reason. This is a game I truly love and enjoy so much. The Nemesis system is one of the best things ever created, and it's so sad that it's still stuck behind a patent. The game is pretty typical open world stuff with enemy camps, side quests, checklists to mark off, and so on. But the whole orc army side of things is absolutely incredible and even quite addicting. I just love how expansive it is, how different orcs can move up in rank, all the different perks that they can come with, the revenge system, it's everything in between. It's just so enjoyable. I put in about 35 hours of playtime into this, and I was preparing for a rather long video that I was going to make on this channel. However, during one of my play sessions, I fast traveled into a location, opened up the menu to check something, and found that my game was completely soft locked. I could hear the music playing, but I couldn't press anything. I couldn't even open up my PlayStation dashboard, which is very, very rare to happen. I figured this was a random freeze or whatever, so I restarted the console, only to come back and see that my save file was corrupted and it was basically gone. Over 30 hours of gameplay erased, and sure, it's not the end of the world, but I was absolutely devastated because I had spent so much time in the game just completing various missions and really locking into the orc fight pits, and that was basically it for me. I know technically I could just start over, and maybe one day I still will, but losing a save like that kills all the momentum. And it's not even just about replaying the story missions. I can do that just fine. It's about losing the specific orcs that I had recruited, the rivalries that I had formed, the captains that I built up, and all the moments that made my version of the game feel a little bit more personal. Once that was gone, I just sort of lost the willpower to rebuild from scratch, but I think eventually I will end up doing it. Finally, on this list, we have Sorrowos, and if you've been on this channel for a little while now, you know why this game is on this list. I respect Sorrowos. I actually think it's a good game, like the rest of the games on this list, but for me, Sorrowos was a game that I gave up in the 4th or 5th biome, and I believe this game has 6 total biomes, and the reason I gave up on it was because it just felt like a worse Returnal to me. There really weren't any new improvements to the gameplay. There were no impactful additions made. The dodge system or the new parry system is fine, I guess, but it just wasn't interesting enough for me to keep going. Where I was really let down was in the build variety and the guns. There was less guns in this game. There's little to no build variety. The perks that you pick up as you go around on these different levels and stages just don't really impact the build that much. And in a roguelike, you expect to have that build variety. Now, Returnal is one of my favorite games of this generation. I really, really like it. I love the world that it built. It's so mysterious. It makes you feel lonely. It has this strange sense to it. I don't know how to explain it, but that game was also lacking a bit in its roguelike mechanics in the sense that there was no real build variety, but the mystery of the story was enough to keep me going. Sorrowos does not have that. I did not enjoy the story of Sorrowos. I think that was a letdown as well. The premise sounded interesting at first, but it ended up kind of just being like a love story kind of thing. So I was kind of let down in that regard. It has less guns than Returnal. It has little to no build variety. I don't know. I was pretty let down by Sorrowos. It's a game that I ended up dropping, and I likely won't be picking it back up unless there's some major update that adds what I'm looking for, but I don't know what the chances of that are. Anyway, that's it for this list. Thank you guys for watching. As always, I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you did, hit that like button. If you're new here, be sure to subscribe, and I will see you all in the next one.